Timo, can you hear me?
Yeah,
All right.
all is fine.
Do you do
You're
a
good to go.
quick introduction or shall I just get started in a minute?
No, we haven't done transition so far. You can just get started whenever you're ready.
All right. Well, I guess it's 11:30. Welcome very much to this information session. I'm Dominic Hangartner. I'm the Director of Studies of the MACIS program, the Master in Comparative and International Studies, which is a joint program of both ETH and the University of Zurich. I'm very excited to tell you a little bit about the program. That shouldn't take forever, so that we have enough time for your questions right afterwards. So without further ado, let's get started. The probably most important feature of the MACIS is that it's a very research-oriented graduate program in political science. And it's this particular focus that I think distinguishes it from some of the other programs that you already heard about and will be hearing more about later this afternoon. In terms of structure, it's pretty much the same as many others. It's a 4-semester, meaning 2-year program. If you study full-time, 120 ECTS. It concentrates on questions such as democracy, political violence, political economy, sustainable development, political behavior, but also has a very strong focus on research methods, both qualitative and quantitative, but there's a lot of statistics and research designs in this course. It's the entirety of the program. All classes and courses are taught in English, which makes sense because, as you'll see in a second, the majority of our students are not from Switzerland. Because of its focus on research and the research methods, the MACIS, we often think of it as a preparation to prepare you for subsequent PhD programs. Now, not everybody who does a MACIS does a PhD afterwards. That's also not the expectation, but slightly more than 50% of our students, after completion of the program, do a PhD. Those who do not do a PhD typically end up in quite research-oriented positions, either in the private or the public sector. All right. What is also different is that you have to apply to the MACIS and you have to be selected for the MACIS. The way this works, and I'll tell you a little more about in a couple of minutes, is that we make admissions based on your application sur dossier, meaning that unfortunately we cannot talk to each applicant individually, but based on the paper submitted, we'll have to make the difficult decision whether or not this qualifies you for a MACIS program. And again, I'll say a little more about sort of our requirements. But this has a few huge advantages, meaning if you are selected, then you are part of a highly dedicated and small cohort. Last year, in fall 2021, we had 17 students starting. I think we are on track. It looks like, based on initial admissions, it will have the same number starting next fall. And so these very small cohorts and classes allow for a lot of very close student-faculty interactions, right? Some of the courses are, like a sort of lecturing statistics is taught to all students, all sort of 17 students at the same time. But then, as you'll see, we also have a lot of research seminars where it's really a small group teaching, one professor with 4 to 5 students, and that's just radically different from my experience at many other Swiss universities, and we are very happy and very privileged to be in the position. As I mentioned before, we have a very international student body, and in times of COVID, it's slightly different than in previous years, but on average, we have about 50 to 60% of our students not coming from Switzerland. And I think that's just fantastic because, especially for something like political science, questions of democracy, autocracy, and everything in between, it's just very valuable to have a sort of diverse set of opinions and diverse set of experiences represented in the classroom. And I hope all of these things together, the small class, the international student body, the tight interactions between student and faculty, create a very intellectually stimulating environment. And how that could the consequence of that, or one possible consequence, is what you see here. So in a research seminar that I taught fall a year ago, I was a little tired of, the usual type of research seminars where, I'll do a few introductory lectures and then the student present, stuff that they've read. And I thought, let's really put sort of the research into research seminar. And what we set out to do is that we ran an experiment on how to counter racist hate speech on Twitter, which types of interventions are effective in reducing hate speech then. And this is, our amazing students that you see here who were part of this seminar. As you see here, we also managed to publish this in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. And, if you don't believe me, that's fine. But here's, one of the students in this seminar, Franziska Vogel, who then basically, tweeted that, the kind of immersive collaborative research experience that she got in this seminar was, part of what she described, Herbert, invaluable experience that was part of the MACIS program. And so, this is really, I think, one of the benefits, and that's what I meant when I said, I feel very privileged to teach in this program, is that we have a lot of resources and a lot of time and very small classes, such that we can really create novel and unique things together, faculty and students. Okay, so here's a few faculty. There are many more. In total, we have from ETH at CIS, about 11 faculty, and then 20 more at the University of Zurich. And since this is really a joint program of both ETH and University of Zurich, you can take courses with all of them. And so there's a lot of options at both universities of the courses that you want to take. One question that I often get, and so that's, how I want to address it heads on here, is what's the difference between the MACIS program of the University and ETH Zurich and the program, the MA program offered at the University of Zurich. And I want to be very clear, both are fantastic programs, but there are some differences in terms of the focus, and languages and other things. So if you're interested in Swiss politics or political philosophy, these things are much better covered at the University of Zurich. So then I could not recommend that you take the MACIS program, right? One of the biggest differences is that the MACIS is a specialized program. So it's not a consecutive following a BA at another Swiss university, unlike, say, the Master in Political Science at the University of Zurich. And that's why we are in the position that we can select our students by admissions. We don't have to accept all students who got a degree of 4 or higher at a Swiss university. They are both equally long. As I mentioned, in MACIS, all the courses are taught in English. We have a sizable fractions of students abroad, which, as I mentioned, I think is fantastic. Very small class sizes. And in a way, in the MACIS, you get the best of both worlds because you get both the faculty from ETH and the University of Zurich. Let me show you here the course structure. What are you expected to do, or what are the things that you can do over these 4 terms? In the first term, there's a lot of what we call core courses. These are courses that you have to take, including Methods 1, which gives you an overview of both sort of introductions to quantitative and qualitative methods. Methods 2, which then follows up with quantitative methods all the way to linear regression. And we have a few more core courses in political violence, democracies, comparative politics, IR topics. And this is followed up then in the second term with another methods course, research designs for causal inference from both experimental and non-experimental data, a core course on political economy. And then you can start with, like, I think the really best stuff, the research seminar. You've seen the example of sort of the Twitter experiment before, where we really work in small groups together on topics that you're particularly interested in. That's basically starting in the second semester. How we proceed with the rest of the study program in the third term. You can take an exchange. You can do that either with our friends from the Graduate Institute in Geneva, our in many ways sister institution that we closely collaborate with, or at some other university that you're interested in. And then you come back for, if you do an exchange program, you don't have to do an exchange program, you can. But if you do, you come back for the fourth and final term, where you write your master thesis. And the master thesis is not, and I think, the way I experienced it when I studied, it can be a lonely experience, but that's not the case here, because we have sort of, we hold your hands. We have a series of workshops where you meet with the other students writing a master thesis and regular intervals, where you also present the initial ideas and get feedback. Obviously, you have to write your master thesis on your own, but sort of in the process to get there, all the steps to get there, you're part of your peers and you get closely supported by faculty. Okay. Another thing that we can offer is research and teaching assistant positions for you. Every year we have at least 10 positions. Typically it's much more, meaning everybody who wants to work for one of the research groups can do so. And I think that's really great because it gives you an opportunity, a really hands-on experience to be involved in research and teaching. And especially if you're thinking about doing a PhD, what you do as a research assistant is much closer to what you will be expected to do in a PhD than sort of taking the courses that you're taking. But also, obviously, we pay you about 28 Swiss francs per hour, right? And so if you work one day a week, which is, feasible given sort of the other time demands that we have in terms of your studies, that can, not cover all of your living expenses, but, at least sort of a substantial fraction of your living expenses. And in order to apply for these jobs, we have a centralized system, makes it very easy for you. And so this is really what the vast majority of our students do, is that they also work for, one or several research groups in one of these research or teaching positions. Okay. What about after the MACIS? As I mentioned repeatedly, many of our students do a PhD afterwards. Others start jobs in these research-oriented or research-intensive positions, could be at international organizations. A lot of our students who go to these type of jobs and go to international Geneva or Brussels. It could obviously be also for governmental and non-governmental organizations or the private sector research positions in banks, pharmacy, and other companies like this. So let me tell you a little bit about this infamous admission to the MACIS. Okay, so first question, like who can apply? You need a bachelor degree from a university that I should have heard of. And ideally, the bachelor degree is in political science. You can substitute a little bit, but you need a strong political science background. And you have to have good grades. Now, the question will be, what do I mean by good grades? And, there's no strict rule here. But if you have a 5 on average, a 5 on average in all your political science courses, and a 5 on average in all your statistics courses, then you can think about applying. Okay. And we also have some specific course requirements, but you find all that information on our website. So, if you're thinking about applying, just make sure that you had some statistics and you had sufficient classes in political science as well. We have 2 admission windows. I don't have to talk much about the first because it has expired. We have the second window, which opens April 1st, runs all the way through the end of April. If you want to apply, that's the window that you have to pick. So that's the time frame by which you have to submit your application. If you're still studying towards your bachelor degree and you don't have all the grades until the end of the application window, that's not per se a problem. You can still apply and we can still have a look, and depending on sort of what your grades look like until then, often you're willing to make a bet and say, okay, if you had a 5.7 so far on average, you feel pretty comfortable that, you also do well on your final exams. And so we can still then accept your application, even if you have not received all the grades. So don't worry about that too much. Scholarships, I don't have to say much about this now because this is only relevant for the first application window, as I mentioned before, in the third term, there's the opportunity to do an exchange term, either at the Graduate Institute, which I think very nicely complements many of the things that we do in our program. So we have a lot of students from Geneva coming to ETH Zurich and vice versa. We also have an exchange program with Antwerp, but there are also other universities, obviously, outside of these two, where if that's what you want to do, you can do an exchange program. One last thing I should mention is our student association. The student association is run by the students, so hopefully you someday. We gave them way too much money. It turns out that they couldn't spend during COVID years, so they have a lot of money in their bank now, which they invest in networking opportunities. That's what I call them. I consider them parties, but nevertheless, I do think these things are helpful and important. And so these students are very active. And by the way, these are not just students from the MACIS program, but all the other MA programs at the Department of Social Science and Humanities at ETH. And so, there's also an opportunity to interact with philosophers and people studying at the intersection of science and policy. And I think they're really, really doing a fantastic job in terms of, knitting a dense social network among the students, but also be, a point where, you can ask questions about the program, or if you have any struggles that you don't feel comfortable approaching me about, these students or organizations are also here to support you in that regard. All right, I gave you a lot of information, probably too much information, but don't worry, all the information that you've seen, you find online. And if you want to learn more about the MACIS program, navigate to macis.guest.eth.ch. If you want to learn more about the Center of Comparative and International Studies, sort of see all the many faculties that are part of this program, the research interests, go to cis.eth.ch. And with that, here are some of our proud last students. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm very much looking forward to your questions.